national security to global corruption. This is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Welcome to the Muckrakers, everybody. Today is Thursday, August 8th, and we will be discussing important headlines coming out of the United States, which are sure to have an international impact. So during the next hour, we will specifically take a look at the lawsuit against Google, in which a U.S. judge ruled that the mega corporation has built an illegal monopoly. We will also deep dive on Google, its connections to the intelligence community, and its various methods in censoring and suppressing dissenting voices online. But before we get into that deep dive on Google, I do want to discuss a very interesting story, again, coming out of the United States, which focuses on a Pakistani national who has alleged ties to Iran, who has been arrested for allegedly plotting to assassinate various officials within the United States on both sides of the political spectrum, including the former president, Donald Trump. So that's what we have coming up for you on today's episode of the Muckrakers on TNT. I'm your host, Taylor Hudak. I'm joined by my fantastic co-hosts, Andrew Eborn and Basil Valentine. Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you straight away. Break down this latest news item for us on this Pakistani national who has been arrested for allegedly plotting to assassinate various officials. Again, this is such an interesting story given the geopolitical landscape and the geopolitical context that we are seeing within the political sphere within the United States. So lay out the facts for us, and then we'll open it up to a broader discussion.
Absolutely. And it's a delight that today is the 8th of the 8th, which is incredibly lucky, not only for people around the world, but also the 8th of the 8th is Octopus Day, Octopus TV and various other things. So let's have a look at the facts as we know them. A Pakistani national, a 49-year-old Saeed Faisal Shahzad. He's been charged with plotting to assassinate former President Donald Trump. Basically, he faces federal charges, including attempted murder and threatening the president. Apparently what he did, he was alleged to kill Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. What's interesting is the plot was uncovered by law enforcement officers through a combination of surveillance and intelligence gathering. And I always say, look, every move that you take, every breath that you take, they're watching you. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into what that means. As I say, data is the new currency, and we'll be talking about Google in a bit. So what are the legal proceedings? Basically, he's currently in custody and legal proceedings are ongoing. Authorities are investigating the case, so we're going to get more and more about this sort of side. What it does highlight in this extraordinary time is the ongoing security concerns and threats against high-profile figures. And a very different high-profile figure at the moment, Taylor Swift. She was due to do a concert in Vienna. I was talking about this morning. And she's abandoned that in spite of the zillions that it would have earned her, again, because of one of these threats. So we need to be aware of what's going on in the world, and various surveillance companies are enabling us to do that.
Yeah, great breakdown. Thank you for that, Basil. I now want to turn it over to you. So what's interesting about this story, well, there's many elements of it that are very interesting. However, the criminal complaint against this individual, this Pakistani man, was just unsealed a few days ago, earlier this week. However, the arrest actually took place on July 12th, so just about a month ago. In fact, July 12th, of course, was just one day before the assassination attempt against the former President Donald Trump. Do you find it interesting or telling that this information is now being brought forth before the public?
Well, certainly, but the first thing I've got to mention is I've got a different name from the one Andrew mentioned. I've got the name Asif Merchant as being the one associated with Iran, yes, in connection with a plot to murder various people, including Donald Trump. He was indeed arrested on July the 12th this year, allegedly for attempting to trying to recruit a hitman in New York. But it turns out that hitman was, in fact, an undercover Federal Bureau of Investigation agent, which leads, of course, to the question, well, to what extent was Merchant trying to recruit the hitman, and to what extent was the hitman seeking to inveigle Merchant into a plot? Of course, the wider ramifications of this are that there's every chance the United States could be involved in some kind of hot war with Iran in the very near future, due to its ironclad support for Israel, following Israel's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas. Of course, in Tehran, he was there for the inauguration of Pezeshkian. So therefore, the United States may well be looking to garner wider public support at home for hostilities with Iran. And what better way to do so than to produce somebody supposedly involved in an Iranian plot to assassinate the ever-popular Donald Trump. Now, first of all, Asif Merchant is a Pakistani national. He made regular visits to Iran, but I don't think you can necessarily pin this plot on the Iranian authorities. And secondly, well, the Iranians, for their part, Pezeshkian, he has actually asked the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, to refrain from attacking Israel, saying the potential effects could be crippling Iran's economy, infrastructure, and even possibly leading to the country's collapse should Iran decide to hit Israel hard, as had originally been mooted. So it's a complex situation. Asif Merchant, it's been revealed he had no previous criminal record. The Pakistani authorities have found no trace of him whatsoever as having any criminal background. So therefore, why did he suddenly take it upon himself to avenge the death of General Soleimani at the American hands during the Trump presidency? Seems a sort of slightly unlikely story all round.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I find it quite unusual. Andrew, why don't you weigh in? Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of points. I mean, Basil's absolutely right. And it is interesting how sometimes the media can bandy all sorts of names around. And sometimes it's more than one plot that is foiled. But certainly Asif Merchant, who flew from Pakistan to find the hitman, certainly he's the one who's referenced in the ABC news articles. And what's guaranteed is clearly there's more than one plot. And as you say, the timing is quite extraordinary, because it was just before the Trump rally where he famously got that ear injury. And what happens, there's all sorts of questions to be asked. And I always urge on this program and others that we must question everything, not just about the identity, about the names that are bandied around, but also about how things happened. I am still astounded that a hitman could get onto a roof within 100 yards of Donald Trump and wasn't stopped beforehand. All those sort of questions need to be asked. And as you rightly point out, question the names of everything. Media check out other bits and pieces, because how many more plots are going to be uncovered? And I suspect if people keep digging and digging and digging, there are lots of these plots. And I suspect that they're going to be drip fed. And you then have to ask the question, well, why are they being drip fed? Well, there's some political mileage in turning around and saying somebody is under threat. And I would certainly suggest that there's been some sort of political mileage in terms of Trump's popularity. He was hailed as a hero with that iconic image of him after he had been shot. Fight, fight, fight. You remember, on that sort of basis. And I predict that will go down in history as one of the iconic images of this particular time.
Although it's worth noting that Google might have scrubbed that image. We can come on to that when we look at Google's monopoly of cyberspace. Shortly.
This is absolutely right, Basil. And this is why we make such a great double act. I thought, and triple act with three of us, because I thought I'd mention that. And you're right, that's the image that I would thought be top of every single search. But surprisingly, it's disappeared. Draw your own conclusions.
Sources say that. Yeah, go on.
I just wanted to build upon quickly your point that you had made, Basil, which was that the story seems quite unlikely. And again, this is regard to the Pakistani individual, Asif Merchant, because according to the U.S. Attorney General for the Eastern District of New York, he actually stated, and I'm quoting here in the reports, that this individual was working on behalf of others overseas. So you see a connection being made between his activities within the United States when he arrived in the United States in April and his working with and connecting with those overseas. So they're trying to definitely establish some connection between a threat to political leaders within the United States and perhaps our enemies, U.S. enemies over in the Middle East. So that's an interesting point to be aware of. But I also just want to again remind everybody that since the arrest took place, that was July 12th, and since the story broke out, a few key things have happened, of course, that we have touched on this program. Trump's assassination attempt just the next day, Netanyahu's speech in which he really encouraged war with Iran or conflict with Iran. There's, of course, been an escalation of conflict in the Middle East with the assassination of a top diplomat. And there have also been these riots in the UK. So much has gone on. And I think it's just important to understand this latest development with this individual merchant in the context of those few key points. But why don't you go ahead, Basil?
Yeah, I mean, amongst the sort of narratives being presented as pointing to his potential guilt is that Asif Merchant traveled to Iran several times between November 2017 and April 2024 on 3 passports. And he stayed in Iran from November the 2nd to November the 14th, 2017. He also spent time in Iran from September the 17th, 2023 to October the 15th, 2023, after which he flew to the US on November the 21st, 2023, from where he returned to Pakistan on December the 17th last year as well. Now, all of this travel, perhaps he was enjoying himself, but it doesn't necessarily point to any guilt. In fact, as a married father of 2, aged 46, he's starting to have the look of a patsy, being maneuvered around with leaving a trail which can be interpreted as working with the Iranians. But, as I said, I don't see why this individual would take it upon himself to become involved in such a complex and dangerous plot as to assassinate a former president. He also traveled to Iran from Karachi airport on January the 15th this year, returning on February the 12th. April the 1st, he again took a flight from Karachi to Iran and returned to Karachi on April the 8th. He finally traveled to the US via Turkey from Pakistan on April 11th of 2024. It's known that the United States doesn't really have many of its own operatives taking those kind of routes. One wonders whether Merchant is himself some kind of security asset. And like so many before him, once he'd done his international travel and the framing was right, then he suddenly found that the accusations were being pointed at him and he was no longer required.
Absolutely. Any other final points, Andrew, before we cut for a short break?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's just, again, sort of highlighting the risk in this day and age when we come on to the beautiful segue for Google is looking at the names and how different stories can be conflated, if you like, on that sort of basis. And what I would urge everybody to do is double check everything, because names get bandied around and they get substituted. And I was looking again at the particular name which you mentioned. There were a number of different pictures and they've been wrongly ascribed, if you like, for particular stories. Some people who have exactly the same name, and there are quite a few common names where this happens. And this is why it's so important in this day and age to question everything. And I think what we try and do always is we recommend people get their information from several different sources, because as we were about to come on to, when we talk about things, the way that you can manipulate information so that you take things as gospel. And just as a brief comment, I talked about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and we were previously talking about, when you do your Google search, when I talk about that iconic image, which I referenced beforehand, I remember looking on the Muckrakers a few days afterwards, and bizarrely, that iconic image couldn't be seen on the first few scrolls of Google. I don't know if you found any further information on that.
All right. Yes, we're going to get into all that and more. We will discuss a deep dive on Google. However, guys, we do need to jump to a short break. We'll be right back in just 90 seconds.
I was a quarterback at Hardaway High School, college first-round draft pick on and off the field. We were taught to not show any signs of weakness. During the football season, I would stop eating. But I didn't know I was depressed. I thought that something was wrong with me. For 20 plus years was physical. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father, as a man, and as a husband. put the importance on your mental health. I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. The first tool is therapy. The second one is positive self-talk. And then journaling, putting your thoughts on paper. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
Lies. We're being told lies by greedy foreign developers who want to build renewable energy projects in Australia. They are not good for the environment. Thousands of hectares of productive farmland will be cleared and native wildlife will die. These developments promise clean energy, but at what cost? Let's help protect our communities and their irreplaceable way of life. Let's rethink renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to letsrethinkrenewables.org.
The Muckrakers are restless. This is today's News Talk, TNT.
All right, welcome back, everybody. You're watching the Muckrakers on TNT. Basil, I apologize. I did abruptly cut you off there for a short break, but I know that you're eager to build upon the discussion that we were having specifically
just very quickly about
this Pakistani gentleman. So go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Just quickly about Asif Merchant. The guy holds a master's degree in management systems and was working in banking since 2002. Geo News obtained his resume, and he worked as a branch manager in a bank in Karachi in 2010. The document also mentioned that he managed an asset and liability portfolio of over nearly 2 billion rupees, including clients from the petroleum, textiles, leather, paper products, chemicals and pharmaceutical sectors, as well as various retail, commercial and corporate clients. Does that really sound like a crazed lunatic who wants to assassinate Donald Trump?
Thank you so much for mentioning that. You know, I am always very curious as to who is being told to us as being the perpetrator of these crimes, of these very dramatic assassination plots or shootings. I like to know the details of these individuals. I know that oftentimes a lot of the media wants to suppress that information or withhold it. One of the reasons being the fact that they don't want to make a celebrity out of these individuals. But I think it's so important to understand their background perhaps and get that additional context. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And you have to say to yourself, very quickly, you have to say to yourself, you know, was he unlucky in recruiting a hitman? That the guy he got in touch with, I've no idea, through the internet or the yellow pages, just happened to be actually a member of the FBI. That would be very, very unlucky, as well as unprofessional on his part, though, you know.
I have to say, I find the whole thing extraordinary, which is why when we start banding these names around, is that you're quite right to ask these questions, because it sounds like something out of the movies. You know, I want to recruit a hitman. Well, here's somebody from the FBI. I mean, I don't buy it. I think we need to dig a bit deeper into that sort of stuff. It doesn't make sense. And why is it being drip fed? And why there are so many different names? I think this is what highlighted at the very beginning when you're looking at this sort of stuff, because there are so many different people. And I can guarantee, in the same way as we predicted the vice president Kamala's running mate, I can guarantee there will be more names bandied around. And what we should do is just question all of them. And actually, before we condemn anybody, let's wait for that evidence. Let it go through the due process. So rather than just saying, oh, here's a name and so on and so forth, and here's their wonderful background, and rupees are not worth very much anyway, so $1 billion is not worth tuppence halfpenny. But the reality is that we do need to ask those questions rather than just rushing in. And that's that weird thing we have in the news, but people elsewhere apart from on TNT, what they will do is the rush to be first. It's not the rush to be accurate, it's the rush to be first, because you want to break a story and so on and so forth. And I think, if anything, this is another one where we have to question everything, take a step back, work out, look, is this really the elements? And if not, are there particular questions that should be asked? And we will continue to ask those questions.
The whole case reminds me of one that surfaced in China a few years ago, where a woman paid a hitman thousands of yen to assassinate her husband, to murder him. And then she went to the police to complain that the hitman had defrauded her and had not carried out the execution. True story.
I love it. And this woman is going to be a guest on the Muckrakers next week. It's going to be good. It is quite extraordinary. Question everything. We always say that.
Exactly. Now, gentlemen, I do want to turn our focus over to Google, do a deep dive on this company. Also, this recent lawsuit. The company seems to be in quite hot water, I would say, right now. And I'll hand it to you, Andrew, to give some of those details.
Yeah.
You are a legal expert, a lawyer, but yeah, so Google is in trouble, but we don't really know what the outcome could be. It seems that Google is going to appeal this recent ruling. So why don't you just lay out for us?
I was looking, and absolutely, and I always like to put things in perspective and get the latest news about what Google is worth. And it tells you what a sort of global gorilla it is. In Q2 of 2024, the total revenues was $84.74 billion. That's $84.74 billion, which is absolutely huge. And it's anticipated to reach $273.37 billion in 2024. And just to put that in perspective, Google itself, as you probably remember, was founded in 1998 by Larry Page and Sergey Brin when they were PhD students at Stanford University. And the company quickly grew and became the leading search engine and expanding into other digital services and products. Now, when you get that big and that enormous, obviously the lawyers all had their eyes on you. And in particular, the European Commission began investigating Google's dominance in search advertising in 2008. In 2010, there were various investigations and fines were imposed by the European Union, including about anti-competitive practices, about search abuse of its search dominance, and unfair practices, as I say, in advertising. In 2017, just to talk about the billions again, the EU fined Google $2.4 billion for manipulating search results in favor of its own shopping services. It's what I said beforehand about making things disappear, and I referenced Trump, and I think Basil might have some points on that in a bit as well. But to manipulate the results when people are relying on those search things, that was the complaint in that sort of side. 2020, the US Department of Justice had filed a landmark antitrust lawsuit against Google, accusing it of maintaining an illegal monopoly in search and digital advertising. And in 2021, the EU imposed additional fines and restrictions on Google, focusing on its Android operating system and online practices. And I think just to give sort of Basil an opportunity to respond, because I know he wanted to mention something about the Trump case, it's putting this into perspective. Is this global gorilla worth absolutely billions is controlling, if you like, how we get information. So if you tap in a search request and it promotes particular answers to you, it basically will give you the narrative, whatever narrative the person who pays the most for gets you to do. On a simple basis, say, give us the best plumber in the world. Well, whoever pays the most money is the best plumber.
Exactly. I'm a little bit skeptical if we are going to see any real change here, because as I mentioned, this is going to head into perhaps appeals phase. And even if Google were to be fined, for example, I doubt this company is going to be broken up, or at least elements of it is going to be broken up. I think it's just going to be perhaps fined, if it even is fined. And then where is that money going to go? Just back into the same corrupt US system. So I'm not too hopeful. What about you, Basil? How do you see this? How do you see an outcome with this?
Well, the great thing about Google from the early part of this century was that, it totally revolutionized search. I'm old enough to remember Alta Vista in the pre-Google days. And then Google came along and you just got much, much better results. It was as simple as that. It was totally neutral and, produced whatever information, whatever links you wanted. Now, it's changed quite dramatically over the last 10 years in so